The Joan Lee Show on 98 FM.
You are listening to The Joan Lee Show with Maureen O'Connell this evening. We are talking about Richard Dawkins. Oh yes, he has claimed that forcing religion on children without questioning its merits is as bad as child abuse. What a child should be taught is that religion exists, that some people believe this and some people believe that, said the professor. What a child should never be taught is that you are a Catholic or a Muslim child, therefore that is what you believe. That is child abuse. Can teaching religion to children be bad? He doesn't think that it should be taught as fact. So do you think religion should be taught as fact? Michael Nugent from Atheist Ireland, how are you doing this evening?
Grand, man.
Of course, in our system here in Ireland, we have a religious ethos in many schools. The fact that we teach it, or it can be taught as fact, what do you make of that?
Well, the difficulty is that over 90% of the primary schools are run by the Roman Catholic Church. Most of the rest are run by other religions. Mm-hmm. And then there's a tiny amount of Educate Together schools, which are much better than the others, but they're still multi-denominational. They're not non-denominational. Yeah. So the difficulty is that it's fine, obviously, if you believe in religion. You get your child taught what you want your child to be taught. But it's at the expense of the human rights of freedom of conscience and belief of minorities who don't believe that. And if parents want to teach their children religion, that's fine, it's up to them. But they shouldn't be expecting the state to be funding that for them.
So you think that it has no place in schools?
Well, teaching about religion certainly has a place, just as teaching about anything else has. But you shouldn't have the same person who is teaching a child factual things like, Dublin is the capital of Ireland, or 1 and 1 is 2, also teaching them opinions such as that God exists, or a particular version of a God exists.
53981 to get involved in this debate. Now, of course, there are people who will not agree with you, Michael, and say that is not an opinion. To them, it is fact that God does exist. Is it too much to have this sort of a debate with children of inquiring minds who are, perhaps under the age of 10?
Well, I mean, look, children wouldn't be labelled. This is the point I think that Richard is making, and is quite valid, is that you wouldn't even dream of calling a baby or a child, a socialist baby, or a capitalist baby, or a Nietzschean baby, or a Fianna Fáil baby, based on philosophical positions that their parents hold.
God, you're giving people a branding idea. Watch that.
So I mean, certainly the parents have those beliefs, but they shouldn't be labelling the children with those beliefs. The children can form their own beliefs gradually as they reach the age of reason, but they shouldn't be described as having those beliefs. And the other thing that I think is significant about what Richard is saying about child abuse.
Yeah,
we tend to use the phrase child abuse in Ireland and possibly in other countries recently, to mean child sex abuse, and particularly in the clerical context. But he's not saying that it's as bad as another type of child abuse. He's saying that it is a form of child abuse, and the form that I think he's talking about is telling children, again, that are very impressionable, that they will burn in hell for eternity if they do this, that or the other, or if they don't do this, that or the other, and that type of creating fear of eternal damnation in children is a form of mental abuse, and certainly for children it's a form of child abuse.
In relation to that, Michael, teaching about whether it be Christianity, or obviously in this country it's Christianity, mainly Catholic, that sort of fire and brimstone sort of teaching, it has stopped. You're not hearing that in primary schools now, that you do this and that's it, you're going to hell forever, really, are you?
Well, it's certainly getting better, and there's no doubt about that, and that's the pattern around the world, is that countries are becoming more secular, and that individuals are moving more towards self-expression values and thinking things through to themselves. Well, it's still the case that most of the schools are run by the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church believes that promoting Roman Catholicism is the primary purpose of their schools. They have a Catholic Schools Week once a year to reinforce that. They start the days with prayers in some schools.
That's their prerogative, though. It is a Catholic school.
Well, it's their prerogative if they're running their own schools. Now, I've certainly no problem at all with individuals funding their own schools with as long as they stick with the state curriculum, in whatever way they want. But the difficulty is that they impose that on other children who are not of that religious belief. And then here's the way to look at it. Hypothetically, if there was even one atheist school in the country, and we're not looking for atheist schools, we're looking for neutral schools. But if there was even hypothetically one school that actively taught children that there was no God, and that if there was even one set of Catholic parents that by force of circumstance had to send their child to that school, we would never hear the end of it.
Okay.
But they seem to think that the other way around, it's just normal and we should just put up with it.
What about the fact that religion in schools, and more schools are teaching, they may have an ethos, but they may teach about other religions as well, and tolerance and things like that. That's important, that it instills morals into people from a very early age, and we're trying to make a more understanding group of people.
Yeah, this is another very important issue. I mean, religion seems to have created the impression among a lot of people that morality is an attribute of religion. It isn't. Morality is an attribute of just being a normal human being. And morality is based on things like empathy and compassion and reciprocity and human factors rather than religious factors. In fact, what religion does is it corrupts morality by adding in the complicating factor of saying even if something is not compassionate and does cause unnecessary suffering, you still should do it because the creator of the universe says so. That's
an interesting point, Michael. I'm speaking with Michael Nugent, who's the chairman of Atheist Ireland. Sean is also here. Sean, Michael has just said that religion can corrupt morality. What would you say to that?
Certainly can. Just the same way as anything can corrupt morality. But just because it can corrupt morality does not mean that it can't have a say on it or it can't teach it.
Okay. The idea that Richard Dawkins has said that children should be taught that religion exists but not taught it as fact in schools. What do you make of that, Shawnee?
Well, frankly, it's I personally disagree entirely with what Richard Dawkins is saying. If a parent wishes to send their child to a school to be educated in that school in a particular fashion, then that is that parent's right. The main reason why I firmly agree with religion being taught in school is from a cultural point of view rather than a religious point of view. Because if you look at the way religion is taught in modern Irish schools, it's not taught as fact. It's not taught in a sort of doctrinal way. It's taught as very abstract terms of ethics and of notions like love and friendship and all the rest of it. It's not indoctrination as it was in the past.
Okay, Michael, what would you say to that? That it's not indoctrination, and culturally it can be very important for the cohesiveness of society to teach this in schools.
Well, it depends on what school you're going to. There are schools certainly that are more liberal where it is taught in a more relaxed ways. But there's a case, for example, that we had last year where a member of Atheist Ireland who had sent their child to a school down the country, I won't mention the school or the area, but had told the school that the parents said that they were exercising their constitutional right to opt their child out of the religious education class. There was still the child came home, reciting prayers and singing hymns and things like that. And eventually, it was not even just the school, but the area reacted in such a bad way when these parents raised this issue that local families wouldn't let their children play with that child, and the family ends up having to move out of the area. So it depends on where you live in Ireland. There are some very liberal, tolerant, compassionate areas, and there are still some areas of Ireland that unfortunately are still languishing in the Ireland of the 1950s.
Shawneen, I suppose that's not a nice thing to hear about a child either being pressurised into something or being left out of things because they're not like everyone else. Mm-hmm. Is that what can happen with religion in schools? Because we do have children of a lot more religions in the country now. It is multi-denominational. Can it inherently leave people out?
Of course it can leave people out, but just the same way as many things can leave things, many different subjects can leave people out and alienate people. I'm not good at sports. I was alienated out of school in school from a lot of people because I didn't do PE a lot of the time. Just because it alienates people doesn't mean that you have to scrap it. It means you have to tackle an issue.
Okay.
Can I say one thing, Warren, that I think is very important?
Yes, Michael.
When you say that every parent has a right to have their child educated in accordance with their religious beliefs, that's not actually correct. You have a right to not have your child indoctrinated in beliefs that are contrary to your own, but you don't have a right under international human rights law to have your child educated in a specific religious belief by the state. And the reason that's true is quite clear, is that it's not practical for a state to provide enough schools for every single religious belief spread around in enough parts of the country so that it's practical for every child of every parent of every religious belief to have a school that they can go to. And the only way you can respect everybody's rights equally is to have a school system that is neutral on that issue and lets parents and churches promote religion.
What do you make of that, Seaneen, that it's not a right? And obviously we are talking about legalities with Michael there, but that it shouldn't be a right that a kid can have this sort of religious education.
Right, it might not be a right, but that doesn't take away from the importance of it. So it doesn't. You can't understand Irish society or European society or any society without understanding its religion. So if you ban religious education in a school, or if you remove religious education from a curriculum, you are depriving children of an understanding of society and cultures across the world and of themselves.
But we're not suggesting that. We're suggesting that you should teach children what you're talking about culturally about religion, but the school should not teach that any specific religious belief is true or false. They should leave that up to churches and parents.
Teaching it as fact, Seaneen, what do you make of that? That's what we're talking about.
Well, if a parent... Right, I'll give you an example here from... I don't have children, but I have nephews and a niece.
Yeah.
They go to one of the local schools.
Yeah.
Now, personally, I think that their religious education is very abstract, very... it's wanting in many cases.
Right.
As far as I can see, their religious education is based upon colouring in pictures.
Okay.
I don't see that as going far enough, really and truly. If it was my child, I would like them to be educated perfectly into the religion. A lot of people have no time to be educating their children in religion. Religion is a vast subject. I study religions in college, and I can tell you, to even grasp basic understandings of certain philosophies, you need to spend a lot of time on it.
Would you be happy for your child in school to be taught that there's no God?
No, I wouldn't.
Well, why do you think that non-religious parents should be happy to have their children taught that there is a God?
But I don't think that they should be forced to do it.
Well, then how do you do that then? How do you manage that?
Well, I'll tell you. We used to keep a lot of exchange students here in our house from all over Europe. One particular country that I was very impressed with their education system was Germany. If the young children were from a Catholic background, they were given Catholic education in their religious education. If they were from a Protestant background, they got Protestant education. And if they came from a parent who explicitly said, we do not wish our children to have any religious education, they did a philosophy instead.
How would you deal with the fact that that's just three religions? How many religion teachers would you need for the hundreds of different religious views that exist?
Well, let's take it for example, but you see... Right, let's take it for example in my area. In my area, in my home area of County Monaghan, there is really only two religions.
Well, that's absolutely not true. See, this is the whole point. The very fact that you would say that shows that you don't understand the nature of the issue. There are many people in County Monaghan, I can assure you, that are of more than those two religions.
Well, I've yet to come across them.
Well, have a look around or look at the census results.
Well, I think that you two will be at loggerheads in relation to this, but I'd like to thank you both for talking to me. Seaneen, who believes that it's very important that religion is taught in schools, and also Michael Nugent, chairman of Atheist Ireland, who thinks that teaching religion as fact should never happen in schools. What do you think? 53981 or local 1850 22 98 98. Gentlemen, thank you both very much for joining me on the show. Again, a case of near the twain shall meet. But what do you make of this? Teaching religion in schools, whether it's fact-based or not, do you think it should be taught in schools, that time should be devoted to it or not? Jen, welcome to 98 FM. How are you?
I am, not too bad.
What do you make of teaching religion in school?
Well, I mean, I suppose I mostly was reacting to the notion that at the moment in school, religion is just being taught as kind of a set of ethics and notions and whatnot, which I don't think is true. I mean, certainly not in primary schools, where essentially 2 years of your primary school education are devoted all but entirely to preparation for a religious sacrament
Okay, so you're talking about communion and confirmation.
Yeah, to the deficit of other subjects. And I mean, that's not just conjecture. There was a recent survey, the RSI did a survey, or rather a study of the amount of time devoted to various subjects by primary schools in countries in Europe. And it found that in Ireland we spend twice as much time on religion as we do on science.
Yeah.
And half as much time on science as every other European country. So it's not just, it's not just conjecture to say that an awful lot more time is being devoted. You can call it indoctrination.
Well, they have seen that over the years, in the past 10 years, that while it has remained somewhat steady, that slowly but surely religious education isn't taking up as much time as it used to.
It's not,
in
but
certain schools.
I mean, I think the problem really is, so if I have kids, I don't know, and I'm not confident that 5 years down the line things will have changed enough that I won't have to put my children into a religious school, because the fact of the matter is something like 96% of all primary schools in Ireland have religious patronage, which basically means that if you, like me, don't believe in religion and aren't a supporter of religious education in schools, your options are to either maybe go out of your way to an Educate Together, if you can even get in, because they're very oversubscribed.
But that's multi-denominational as well, so,
But the thing is, I don't find some teaching about religious education in general. I'm not saying you should never mention religion to children. Fine, mention it, that's fine. But there's a difference between teaching people about the general kind of idea of religion, the fact that there are different religions, than teaching them specifically about one religion to the exclusion of all others. To the exclusion,
I fully understand that. So that would be one thing you'd have a point that would be major for you. Do you think that the idea of teaching religion in the wider context, the fact that it is taught as fact in certain schools, is dangerous, or is it good to have a sort of moral baseline throughout the country?
Well, I think in point of fact, most people, even people who tell you that they get their morals from the Bible or from religion, actually don't get their morals from the Bible and religion. And actually, to be honest, I find it kind of personally offensive, the idea that because I don't follow the Bible, I can't be a moral person, because I'm pretty sure that I do a lot of good things and that I don't do them because I'm afraid of going to hell. I try and be a good person. I try and not treat people badly, and I try and treat others the way I would want to be treated, and I don't need the Bible to tell me to do that. I just do that because it's a nice thing to do. And also, there's the law, so I don't need Jesus to tell me not to murder people. I'm pretty clear on that one too.
I think sorry, this is terrible. I'm sure there are believers listening right now, and I'm not saying I'm not. I am.
Terms, if I'm taking it seriously for a minute, I've actually just left a talk in Maynooth being given by a priest who spent 45 minutes talking about demonic possession, who directly demonic possession with the development of mental illnesses. And as someone who's suffered from depression in the past, I found that particularly difficult to listen to.
Okay, so obviously,
and I asked him to clarify, and he said, and that's someone that's teaching that as fact, and that's not good for people to hear.
See, that's where things come into this. 53981 or local 1850 22 98 98. Jen, that is a little bit worrying to say the least. But I'm also joined by Sandra. Sandra, how are you doing?
Hi, Maren, how are you?
I'm very well. Listen, Jen is talking about the amount of, teaching religion as fact in schools and the amount of time that is spent on religion in schools. Do you think that religion should be taught in schools?
I do. Well, I was brought up with religion, not a very strong religion, and I'm choosing to bring my child up as a Catholic. But if she ever changed her mind someday or went for a different religion, I wouldn't tell her she was wrong.
Okay.
It's about her own opinion. But until that day, like Richard said, children shouldn't be brought up as Catholics. They should make up their own minds.
Yeah.
But then he said that his friends down the country chose to bring his children up as atheists, but the children come home from school saying prayers and reciting songs, so obviously the children enjoyed that. So his friends shouldn't have contradicted their point by making their children atheists.
Okay, so you think in the same way as Michael was saying earlier on, that they are indoctrinating their child into atheism?
Yes, so he's telling Catholics that they're wrong, but he's contradicting himself by forcing their children to be atheists.
Okay, so they're...
that was just the one thing that I flagged up when I listened to it. I just thought he completely contradicted himself. For every positive that he said, that was a huge negative.
Jen, I suppose you'd get that as well. I didn't even notice that now, to tell you the truth.
No, I understand that, and I can understand where she's coming from. The one thing I will say is, I think most atheists don't necessarily have an objection to some sort of general religious education, like what goes on in Educate Together, where it's a much more generalised religious education programme. And if you want specific religious education, you do that on your own time.
Well, they took their child out of their school because they were being subjected to religious education, so I think that's a very strong point that family made by removing that child from the school and taking them out of the community.
Okay,
but
so
the thing is, what they're being removed from is not general religious education. What they're being removed from is specific religious education about and into a specific religion, and that's a bit different from telling children, here's an example of 10 religions, make up your own mind, when what they're being told is, here's one religion.
Very true. That was just the one point that I thought that.
Yeah, no, and it is interesting. It is an interesting point.
There certainly is. And Sandra, would you be happy for your children to learn about all religions in school?
Yeah, I wouldn't have an issue if they want to pray to Iron Gigs. They can pray to Iron Gigs. It's about, as long as they're not murderers or thieves, let them be happy.
You're happy on that one.
My child is registered in a school, and one of the points for the school when she goes to school is that she must be Catholic. And although I am sending her to that school because she's Catholic, I think it's wrong for them to turn away other children because they are not Catholic.
Oh God, okay, we don't have enough time to go into that. That's a very, very interesting point, that she must be Catholic. I think there's a lot of schools like that, but unfortunately we do have to leave it there. Sandra and Jen, thank you so much for joining me this evening. A message in here saying, I'm very happy that my child has been brought up Catholic. I think that a lot of her friends are Catholic, and it's a great social and cultural bond is what that says. That's it from us this evening. We will be back again tomorrow. Yes, we're finishing a little bit earlier tonight. Back again tomorrow from 9 p.m.
The Joan Lee Show on 98 FM.